Hi, so in today's tutorial I'm going to be looking at some different typography illustrations as well as giving you some techniques in Illustrator to actually create those. So at the moment you can see that I'm in Pinterest, and I've got a Pinterest board on typographic illustrations, and you can see that there's lots of different ways that you can actually create illustrations. So you can see that there are illustrations that use actual letters to create the forms or the actual shapes of an image. Here you've got letters that are used to create the hair on this actual portrait, and then there's other styles of illustrations where they've actually used rows of text to create like the shape of the actual illustration, or here individual letters that actually fall into this little cascading waterfall. So in Illustrator there's many different ways to actually create a typographic illustration, and I'm just going to run you through some of the techniques that I've been using. So I'm just flicking over to Illustrator now, and I've actually started to create an illustration just so that I can give you a few of the ideas. And this is the actual original image that I'm using to create my typographic illustration from. So it's kind of like a cubist portrait with different coloured parts or sections of the actual image itself. And I'll just turn that off, and I'm just going to take you through some of the different techniques that I'm actually using to create this illustration. So I'm zooming in. One of the simplest ways to actually create some of your images is by using area text. And area text is great when you've got large shapes. So I'm just going to turn my illustration on again so that you can see it. And really each portrait or each image that you do, you will have to assess as an individual item, because each will be different. So any style that you choose, there is no strict formula as to the best way to actually do it. And really what a lot of it is, it's about trial and error and about using different techniques in Illustrator. And it's these techniques that I actually just wanted to show you. Let me just turn off the photograph and let me just show you. I actually started off by drawing some of the major outlines of the shape of the face. And as I started drawing it, and as I've been playing around in Illustrator, I've realized that it's probably not entirely necessary with the drawing that I'm actually doing to do this. And what you can actually do is, if you're using, like, if you've drawn your illustration, you can actually use the paint bucket tool to extract each individual shape so that you can actually have a shape that you're actually working with. And let me just illustrate. I've made this into a live paint object. So if I come across to the live paint bucket, and if I select different sections of the image, I need to have my paths selected. Let me just select a few paths. Well, actually I can select all of that at once just by clicking there. And if I come across to the live paint bucket, what I can actually do is I can make this a live paint group, and I can actually start filling these sections. So if I fill the section, so I come across and I click on the section, and then if I expand it and then ungroup it, what I can actually do is I can actually get the individual shapes as shapes. So where something might not be a filled shape, when I'm using the live paint bucket tool, I can actually create individual shapes to fill. And I was actually working using this, and then I was actually applying a process. So let me just get a chunk of text here. I'm going to just copy and paste this text. Now obviously the text you use should relate to the actual image. I've kind of just got some random text, and what I can actually do is with these shapes, once I have these shapes, I can use the Illustrator's area text tool. So I click on, and let me just pull this out because this has got some good tools here. I can just use the area type tool, and I literally just click on the shape. So I come across, and you can see now my cursor has got that area, it's got the circle around the cursor, which means that I'm in the area text tool. If I click on the path, then I can actually just Command V to paste. And let me just make that text a darker color so you can see it. Now you can see here if I pull out my character, it's I'm working on an A4 size, so it's quite likely that you might want to work on a larger size image so that you're not working with such small font sizes, because it doesn't give me great variety. But I can reduce that down, making it a smaller font size. So at the moment I can see that my text kind of fills that shape. If I was to deselect, you can see I can't really see that triangular shape very clearly because of the formatting on the text. So what I need to do is I just need to make some adjustments to that text. Let me double click inside it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the character. Actually, let me just bring up the character. Where is it? Attributes. I'm sure it's under. That's a palette somewhere. Let me just find it. Character here. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm actually just going to reduce that type down and just take a look at how it's impacting on my shape and how closely it aligns to the shape. Now the other, so let me just do that first, and I'm just going to reduce the leading down as well until I kind of get, when I deselect that, now you can see that's making quite a clear triangular shape. I've still got some ugly kind of stretching of my paragraph, so I'm just going to like cheat a little and add a few words and maybe and at, and if I add like add a word, so you can see what I'm doing is that I'm just adding text into these sections to fill these sections in. So it's kind of cheating a little bit. At the moment, I'm just going to, you can see that there's more text that hasn't flowed properly. At the moment, I'm just going to leave that like that though. And you can see I've got a fairly close shape in terms of like, it looks like that triangular shape. So let me come now back to my layers. So let me just drag my layers up here. Escape out of isolation mode. And let me turn the picture back on. Now, I made that triangle based on this section over here, so I'm just going to come over and I'm going to position that back on there. Now you can see here I've got my actual drawing on a separate layer, so I can turn that drawing on and off. Now I've just realised that I've put that little section of text on that layer and I don't want it on that layer, so I'm just going to come back and I want it to be on my head layer. So that's where I'm putting all my text. Lock those other layers down and let me just paste it back in, and now I can turn off my head layer so that I can see what's actually happening. Now the other thing that I can obviously do is I can color that text. So if I select the text and then just eye on my keyboard will bring up the eyedropper tool, and I can just sample a color from that so I can make the text the same color as the box itself. So again, I'll just turn off the photograph so you can see what's happening. And so what I can do is I can just continue building up elements of the image like that. Now let me just turn, so that's one way of doing it, and that's using the shapes that I've already drawn. Now as I was experimenting, I realized that I was kind of unnecessarily duplicating an actual process. So if I turn off that little layer there, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to duplicate this section of text, and I'll just, let me turn off the image again. I need some text for this section here. So what I can actually do is duplicate that. So hold down my Alt or Option key and drag that over, and I can actually just reshape this text frame and position it in the shape that I want it. So it works very much just like the normal pen tool. If I want to add an extra anchor point, I can just go to add anchor point, and I'll just add an anchor point down there. Using the direct selection tool A on your keyboard, I can then just drag that down. I can also change the anchor point style or type by clicking on the convert anchor point, and I'm just going to put a curved, I want a curved path here, but I want a straight line there, so I'll just do that. And I want a curve on this one, and I want I want that one to go straight across, and I want that one curved. So now I can go back into my direct selection tool, and oh actually I need another anchor point down here by the looks of it. Well, this should be down here, that should go like that, and this one should just go straight back up. Or I need to just convert that anchor point. And so I just click on, let me just move that out of the way. And you can see that what I'm actually doing, let me just turn off the picture so you can see more clearly. I'm actually just adding my text into this little section here, and I've done it quite easily, just simply by dragging my other text box around. Now, you can sort of spend as much time, I'm not going to go into like the finer details, but you can see now I've got this nice little curved section of text. Again, I've got some ugly holes in that, so I'm just going to adjust again the size and just see what happens. So at the moment it's quite a small font size, it's only 3. Maybe I'll try making it bigger and see what happens. I'm not really happy with the way that's looking, so I'm going to try even making it smaller. I'll make it at a 2 point. And that's kind of starting to look nice, and I might even reduce the leading a little bit, 1.5. And you can see I've got something ugly happening up there, so if I just make a slight adjustment here, I don't know why, oh maybe this point needs to go up just a little bit, or there might be a hard return in it, so I'm just double clicking to go back into the cursor and backspace, yep. And so now I'm starting to get, you can see here, I'm starting to get an okay kind of appearance. Now the next step obviously is I want to make sure that it's a similar colour to what I've got underneath it. So again, I'm just going to select it using the selection tool, I on my keyboard to sample the colour, and that's a similar colour down here, so I'm just going to use that. If I just turn off the picture again, another consideration that you need to have is the colouring and the actual detail that I'm trying to fill. Now you can see here that's a very dark area under his eye, and you can see to compensate for that, what I've done is I've used a very dark bold text, and the same on this side, where I probably should use a nice dark bold text as well, to actually, I don't know where that is, oh that's on the eye, it's on a different layer that I've locked. If I use a nice dark bold text here, and interestingly, like I'm using majority of, using Helvetica, excuse me, I'm using Helvetica for the type, and I've made a conscious decision to use Helvetica New because if you have a look, these are all the options that I have in terms of style. So what I'm after is I'm after now a very condensed but heavy type, and you can see that I can just change that there. And let me just try and put a space here, and see what is happening. So I'm just typing in a few little words there, letters there, just to see how that looks. And now let me turn my picture back on and off. That's looking good. Now I've left this area as it is, and again you can see that this this faint blue outline is the original path that I'm trying to get the text to fit into, and I just wanted to leave it unfinished so that you could have a look. So at the moment I've got that as a left aligned piece of text. Let me just pull out my paragraph. You can see it's left aligned, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to justify it, and once I justify it, you can see again I'm starting to get these ugly spaces. Now if I turn on the hyphenation option, what it'll do is it'll actually hyphenate words, and you can do that, that is an option, but you can start to get some ugly, the end of each sentence might have a dash, so you'd end up with a row of dashes, which is not particularly nice either. So I'm just going to type in and it's kind of changing some of the words here. So when you're actually formatting and composing the text, try and use words that have got lots of different sizes in terms of the number of letters, and that will give you more options as well. So and also different let me just try your oops. And I mean, nobody's really going to sit and can always and read every piece of text that you've got on there. So, you know, I kind of think in these areas, especially we're talking about a font size that's 4 point. that font size is 2 points, so nobody's going to come up that close and actually read. It's only when you're actually at this view or this magnification that you can see that the words might not necessarily make sense. So as I'm zooming out, you can see what's actually happening. So to recap on this, what you can do is you can start with a shape. Let me just turn the person layer on. So you can either start with a shape, and it might be that the shape you've just created is a square or triangle. You can start with a shape, and then we can click on Area Type tool, and then we can add our text in, and then we can adjust things like the leading, the justification, sorry, the leading is over here, the justification, the font size, in order to be able to actually get a representation of the area that we want. Or we can play around, and we can also play around with whether or not the typography is a bold typeface or if it's a thin typeface, and we can also change the color. So that can actually give you some nice shapes on your text. A second technique that you may like to use, and you can see I've done it with this piece of hair here, and this is called text on a path. So when we talk about experimentation with your techniques, I actually started off with my shape. So I have my shape here. Let me just unlock these. Just have to find where the hair, this was, because I've got it locked down on my layers. And you can see this is why it's really important to name your layers, because otherwise you don't know where all the bits are. And I still can't work out, oh there we go, it's on this layer here. Of course, it's on the hair layer. So what I started with is I started off with a shape. So let me just turn the layer back on so you can see my shape. And I started off with this shape here that I had drawn from the original image. Yep, so it's just a piece of hair. I'm just going to undo that. And I thought, firstly, I might use envelope warp and warp the hair into the position. And because that piece is a vertical piece rather than a horizontal piece, I actually started off with vertical. But when I actually applied it, if I apply those two things here, if I go into object and I go into had a complete mental blank. That's okay. If I go into envelope distort, and make with top object, you can see that what happens is the text becomes illegible, so I can't actually see it. And yeah, I could sit and play around with it, but I thought, no, that's not giving me the effect that I actually want. So I thought maybe I need to actually have the text going across the hair. I'm just moving, whoops, a few of those things out of the way so you can see what's going on. So I then rotated my hair and had some horizontal text, and I went back in and I did the same thing, envelope distort, make with top object, and again I wasn't really happy with it. And sort of at this stage, I mean, yeah, in theory that is still text, just doesn't look like text. I still wasn't happy with that as an option. So then what I did is I'm just ungrouping that because for some reason it appears to be part of a group, although it doesn't really matter because I use this. So what I actually did then is I thought a little bit more about it. I thought maybe what I actually want is I want the shape more than anything, rather than having it as a distortion. So I went and I duplicated my line here, and then I went into the direct selection tool and I just deselect and selected the paths. You just got to be careful with this. So what happens is when you select it, it'll select the whole lot and delete the whole lot. So what I'm doing is I'm just deselecting, clicking on the segment of path I want to delete, and deleting the path until I've just, and I don't want that funny line there, so I'm just going to click on that endpoint. So what I've in effect got now is I've got a path for my text to sit on. So again, and what I do is when I'm experimenting, you can see that I've copied and pasted the original block of text a couple of times. It just saves you having to retype it every time. And then I just move on to a different technique. So again, I'm just double click to insert my cursor, Command or Control A to select, Command C to copy, and I come down, and this time I'm going to use my type on a path tool and come down to the path that I want and click, and it inserts a cursor. It's flashing over there, and I'm going to paste. Type on a path in Illustrator is a little bit funky to use, and you do just have to get used to it. You have your start point, which in this case is here. You have your center point or your direction point. Then you have your end point. So I actually want the text to be positioned on top of that line. So I'm just going to click on this middle line and drag it up. And you can see that that's actually eliminated most of my problems. Now you can see here that the R has dropped off here. If I want to include that on there, I'm just going to tweak the text slightly, and I'm just going to make it a little bit smaller, down to 19 point. And there I've got my lovely hair, which I then put back onto my drawing and just rotated into position. So text on a path, great for doing outlines or having a section of text in a particular shape that you want. So that's another little method of work that I've done on this particular image. The next one I want to show you is actually using typography or using a specific font. So this hair here, if I just go Command Y so that you can see preview or wireframe. Oh, it's not showing me the wireframe. Oh, because I've converted it, that's why. I'll just drag out some pieces of hair here, and you can see that that's actually a letter. It's a D, and the font that I've chosen is Showcard Gothic, and I've chosen that because it's kind of like a funky, not proportionate piece of text. And literally what I've done, that's a V, an upside down V, an I, another V. And what I've actually done is I've used point text or point type. So that's where you just click on the page. So click on your text tool, Showcard Gothic is the font, and I just click and type a letter. So I'll just type V, and let me just bring that font up again. And I can now make it bigger. And because it's point type, I don't need to convert it to outlines or anything like that if I just want to stretch or skew it or do something to it disproportionately. So, you know, for these small little areas down there, I've taken a letter like this, I've made it approximately the size I wanted it, and then I've kind of just stretched it into shape. Now again, I'll just turn on the image here, and what I've literally done is looked at the shape of the hair and basically fit my letters into the shape. Just going to undo, and I'm just going to take you back. I don't want that. Yep, that's just undoing. Let me just turn these layers off, and you can have a look at the image of the guy. And you can see that actually in the image itself, it looked like they had letter forms, so like a D, and like you've got some V's there and some N's and some A's, so that all these angular things. And literally what I've done is I've just fitted these pieces of text into the shape of the hair that's gone around. So a really nice, neat little method. And what I've done is I've done it in 2 layers, so let me just turn it off. I've got hair black, so I've got the base. Now I've lost all my hair. Must have turned something off important. Oh, there we go. Oh, the hair. See the highlights. It's all ended up on 1 layer. So in my experimentation, let me just come over. This is where I've been doing some experimentation on my paths and things like that. And you can see that I keep duplicating my artbook because I don't want to lose work that I've done. So you can see here where I've got hair highlights. Let me just turn that off. I've got hair black, which was my base layer, and then I've started to do, I should have renamed this a different name. Then I've put some highlights in, and then I've got even more highlights on top. So I've done kind of 3 different layers of hair, roughly in the shape of the hair of the head that I actually want. You can see I've got features, eyes, and then the actual head itself as I'm starting to work on it. Now another great tool is to use your text warp tool. So let me turn on the base image again. And this is kind of like his frown mark, this triangular section here. So again, I started with, I think I've used Showcard Gothic, so I started with a piece of text, so just click and type. and I put brown. And I'm just going to reduce that to roughly kind of the size. Now, I want it to be quite close together, so I'm just going to reduce the tracking on it and just bring it kind of close. You could even reduce the kerning on some of the letters. Oops. Just to bring it even tighter. And I want that slightly longer, so I'm going to put frown line. Now let me just rotate it in position and have a look and see what's happening. So you can see what I'm trying to make is I'm trying to make this triangular shape here. The next thing I want to do is I can go into object and then envelope distort. And I can actually make it with a warp or with a mesh. And I'm actually going to, can't remember what I did for this one over here. I'm going to try it with a mesh. And when you have a mesh, what it does is it creates a mesh over the top. If I preview it, you can see I've got a mesh happening. In this instance, I'm wanting to reduce the amount of rows and columns because I want more control over what's actually happening. And I'm going to say, okay. And go to my direct selection tool. Now what I can start to do, and again, you can add anchor points. I'm just going to add an anchor point here and anchor point there. Again, this is kind of trial and error, so I'm just going to take that and expand that up. Maybe I need to just drag that down. Yeah, I might have been better off just doing it like that. So I can, if I don't like an anchor point, I can just remove that. And as you're aware, I'm trying to make it that triangular shape. Let me go back to the direct selection tool. I'm trying to make that little, whoops. Trying to make kind of a triangle. This is why it's important to lock down the layers that you're not using. I don't actually think that this is the right tool that I wanted to use because I'm not getting that straight line. I want a quite angular one. You can see that's quite fluid, so I'm just going to move that over there. And because I was foolish enough, actually I can still remove that. It doesn't set it, and I apologise, I'll have to have a look, but there's in the new feature, it doesn't actually use that. You can remove the envelope, and now I can't remember how to remove the envelope object. I want to reset it. Oh, release. Oops, is that what I wanted to do? I don't think so. Oh yes, it releases it. Okay, so let's try it. Come back again, and let's go object, envelope distort. I could try to make it with a top object. So if I want to make it with a top object, I just need a triangle. And this might actually be the best way. So I'm just making a triangle in roughly the shape that I want it. And that needs to be, let me just change the colour so I can see. Yep, so that's on top. So let me just select the triangle. Oops, select the triangle and the text. And then I thought I could right click, no, and then go to object and make with top object. No, that's not working for me either. I don't like that. So let's try another way. And make with warp. I might be able to do it this way if I could. I need to preview it. And you can see I'm just playing really to find out, like, or to get a good idea of the types of effects that that I want. And I think I've had a complete mental blank, so I think I need to about how I actually did the original one. I'm just going to pause for a moment and of course and again, it's expected that you're not going to know anything, like everything about a program when you're actually working, and I had completely forgotten about this tool. So lucky I had a look. To use this tool, what we actually need to do is we need to convert our text to outline. And again, when you're converting or creating an outline of your font, you've got to remember that what you're in effect doing is you're turning it from a piece of text into an editable graphic. So you can of course do individual manipulations with your letters. So you can just click on the anchor points using your direct selection tool and make adjustments like that. So what we want to do though is we actually want to use the perspective tool. I can't even remember what it's called now. How terrible is that? To use that, we basically need to I've had a complete mental blank. I've just done it 2 seconds ago. Is it under free I've lost it. I did have it here. So what we need to do is we can select our text, whoops, like this, and then if we go into free transform, I think it's in free transform. Oh, it is under free transform. You just can't see it. So if you click on free transform, and then if you click on perspective distort. So what we're actually wanting to do is we're wanting to make the edge with the E on it quite large. And at this stage I'm just approximating, so I can see it's around about this size. And then I want to reduce that kind of down to almost a point. And I can have a look and I can see I've got my text there ready to go. So let me just drag it into position and I'll rotate it. And I just found it easier to create this before you rotated it. Oops. And then again, I can click I on my keyboard. Oops, let's go to the select. And then just color it into the appropriate color. So you can see my different working methodologies to actually create that and how I've tried different things. And a lot of this typographic drawing is going to be experimentation and trying to see what's going to work for the actual illustration itself. So you can see that crown line is quite a cool heavy block. One last thing that I wanted to show you, and that's just using the going back to that warp tool, make text with warp. And if I come back into my layers, oh, I got rid of his eye shape. Let me just turn that on, and that off. So what I did is, again, I started with a drawn image of this eye, and I think I'm trying to draw the pen tool. Oh, it's not showing, that's why I can't draw on that layer. And let me just come and draw that eye shape really, really quickly. Now, and again, this is only, that will do for the purposes of this exercise. That eye is only very small, so I knew that I didn't need a lot of text in that to fill it. So what I did is then I went ahead and typed the word eye. And I decided actually I wanted it lowercase. So I actually think that uppercase might work better. And you know what? I actually think I want it in Helvetica because I want a more rounded, fluid font. And again, this is going to come down to your font selection. I think they have a heavy extended. No, that's not right. I might have a black, I want a black condensed. That will do. And what I actually do with this, again, I convert it to outline, so I'm just right click and click on eye, right click, create outlines, and then put that eye shape over the top, arrange, bring to front, select both objects, and then go into object and with top object, and you can see that I've got a nice eye. And again, I can go in and if I wanted to manipulate, you know, the shape, I can go in and manipulate the shape to however I want it to be. I think that eye is actually better than the one that I have. I'm just going to paste that on top of, move that out of the way, paste my new eye in, although I did kind of stuff that up there, so maybe I just need to, if I want to use that one, I need to just go in and fix that. Make these slight adjustments, and you know, in design it's these small details that are really important, that really take the work from being great to being amazing. So you can see, I'll just zoom out, that's my original portrait. Let me turn him off, and this is how my typographic portrait is developing so far. Now, I said earlier, leave all these like extensions of text, so I've left all that additional text in, and the reason I've left it in is if I, you know, on completion of the work, I might kind of look at it and go, oh, you know what, I need a little bit more text in. You probably don't want to end up with a lot of those. They are kind of annoying to get rid of, and you can get rid of them by flowing them. So if I was to click on that text, the red box here, click on the path on the red. Oh, I'm in the right tool. Maybe I'm on the wrong layer. I'm on the right layer. Oh, there we go, I must have clicked hard enough. So I'm just going to click on the red box. Oops. And it's actually duplicated that down there. So what I can actually do is I can click, double click, delete. I didn't actually want to do that like that, so I'm just going to delete that section there. And I want to click. There's something happening, maybe it's my computer, it doesn't like it because I've got too many things open. So I click and I load my cursor, and then what I can do is I can actually extend out all that text like that, or click and draw a text box, so then I can delete all that text at the one time. So I can just delete all that, and then I can delete that text box. So I'm getting rid of that overflow text, which is usually a good idea. And at the end, what you will be doing is you'll be creating outlines. Actually, interestingly, I don't know if you, maybe it doesn't matter. Let's have a look. Again, something new. So what I've done is I've duplicated that. So if I convert this now, instead of making it type, if I convert it to an outline, it eliminates that extra text anyway, so you don't need even to worry about that. You would worry about it, you always want to keep your original with all the actual text in it, in which case you could just leave those, and then obviously when you submit, you're submitting one with all the outlines converted anyway. So just to sum up, we've used a couple of different tools. So we've drawn our image, so let me just turn all of these layers and talk you through the process that I've gone through. There we go. So we've drawn our image, or we've chosen an image actually. So first step, choose an image. Second step, you can draw parts of an image. Start to decide how you might like to actually illustrate it. So we can use, let me turn that off. I've lost his hair. So we can use individual pieces of text to create objects. We can use area type tool to create individual small sections such as this. We can use envelope distort to create sections like that, or we can use type on a path to make sections like that. Now there are plenty of other ways that you can actually create this assessment task. I'm just showing you a couple of methods in Illustrator. I'm just going to show you some of my colleagues' work, some of Jason's work. And you can see he's made a Pac-Man, and again he's used different type to create the images, and rotated obviously pieces of type. It's a really cool little piece and a very different take on it. And here you can see an illustration where he started to like actually key in, you know, and make these parts of the hair in these different sections of text. Another style where it's actually eroding the text. And this is using a neon, this is using the word maze and then converting it into like a 3D. So heaps of different ways you can actually approach this assessment. Good luck, and we'll look forward to seeing your results.